This week, we read chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6 in Appleby and Langer, depending on what your discipline is. And we also watched TED Talks by Suki Kim, Tyler DeWitt, Dan Meyer, Sakina Yacobi, and Ramsey Masalam. We're going to start by talking about the TED Talks before going more into the discussion about the book, before going into discussions about topics that we personally found interesting and relevant.
This week's TED Talks all seem to have the same common theme or message behind them. So after watching them all and analyzing the point of what the speaker was attempting to present to us, I realized that they all spoke about the struggles of schooling being able to relate to students, and that there's a gap between the coursework and content and the students. In the TED Talk by Tyler DeWitt talking about science, he explained that oftentimes there's no emotional connection between the content and what the students are, and you have to convince the students that this stuff is important and this is what we need to be learning. I think as educators, we have to be able to form our curriculum and form the learning information into languages and subjects and stories that will relate to the students so they have passion for why they want to learn it. One thing I also really liked was that he created a little animated story behind his science. I even found myself watching the video and becoming more interested. If he were to just do that talk and to use the real terms, I would have no desire to pay attention, but because he made little cartoons and little animations, I was intrigued to learn more about that. This week TED Talk videos were very eye-opening to me personally because I never realized that there are so many different writing styles across different subjects and different disciplines. And it also was nice to see different opinions and personal experiences from educators themselves. So the video that stuck out to me the most, or the talk, was done by Miss Kim, the female who decided to go to North Korea and teach. I've always known about North Korea and the situation that they're kind of living in, but I never looked into the education system or really thought anything much of it. So it was very interesting to see how writing and learning is used in a completely different culture than the way we live. We are used to using writing as a learning tool, whereas in North Korea, these students or the professor used writing as a way of expression. In a place where they're constantly nervous and on edge and being watched, they don't get very much freedom whether they know it or not. This teacher was able to show the students that they can express themselves through writing. It was a little more of a private thing for them. So that was very nice to see.
Here's a good question. What about the TED Talks did you like the most? Was there any one TED Talk that really stood out to you? Or was there anything that someone said in the TED Talks that you really connected to? The first chapter that we read was about writing in the English language arts. What I have up is an example of a student that was writing a free write. Now, a free write is usually when you're just expected to write whatever you want and make it a story. This child obviously had the task of making it more of a fairy tale where you had to draw your audience in. What the students are expected to do in writing in an English setting is that they are expected to organize their big ideas. They're also expected to create sentences that are grammatically correct and they sound nice together. They're also supposed to be able to compose their thoughts and being able to express an idea to a larger audience. This includes them actually being able to recognize who the audience is as well. Usually this type of writing is read more story-like and is written more story-like, where it usually brings the audience in at the very beginning. There's more emotion in this type of writing than any other writing that the student is going to be doing in their school career. The next chapter that we read was dealing about writing and history in the social sciences. Usually writing in history and social sciences involves more outlining your ideas and being able to create a flow chart so you can express your ideas in a logical manner. As you can see from the example that I have written that's from the book, this person has a base idea and they have thoughts coming off of it. Unlike writing in English, writing in history and the social sciences usually has a very strict outline that it needs to follow. For example, they're usually set up where each paragraph has a mission. It's not like a free write like previously shown with the English example. With these, the student is expected to know a vast number of details, which could help them express their opinion and maybe prove a point about the past. One of the biggest examples of history and social studies writing is the DBQ, the document-based questions. For these types of writing, the child is supposed to be able to put together all of the information they learned into a cohesive example and able to prove a point, whether they're proving it one way or another. There's more of a rigid structure to this one compared to all of the other types of writing that a child learns in school. The next chapter you read was about writing in mathematics. Usually there's not much writing involved in mathematics. However, it can be used to help increase the child's understanding of a concept. Like as shown, a child could be able to organize a concept in a function where it actually makes sense for them. Usually mathematical concepts are very advanced, especially for some children, and this could help them simplify it. Writing in mathematics is usually used in the form of proof, as shown below. The most common use of writing in mathematics is the use of writing as proofs. As shown below, this child uses writing to prove the CP-CT-C theorem. There is currently a debate and a drive to see if there should be more writing involved in mathematics or not. The topic of more or less writing in mathematics is still being discussed and debated. How do you feel on the matter? Do you feel like there should be more writing involved in mathematics, or do you think that there's enough already? The last chapter we read was writing in the sciences. Usually writing in the sciences is done without very much emotion or even opinionated input. Usually what happens when the student is writing in science is that they're writing a lab report, which is basically just expressing their data in a written form. There is a very strict organization which the student needs to follow, as seen in the diagram below. Another thing that's very important when writing science is that the student needs to be aware of words, because in some cases, one word could end up changing the results that they get drastically. For example, if you use a causal sentence such as X caused Y, this could change the entire results and make your results null and void once it's being reviewed by peers. Most of the focus when it comes to writing in the sciences is basically about writing a science report. It's being able to express your facts and what you've observed in a logical manner, rather than in a manner such as reading a story. At this point in your college career, you probably were exposed to multiple ways of writing. Did you have any preference for one form or the other? Which ones do you find the easiest to work with, or the one that matches most with your style? I'm currently a psych major with a focus on psycholinguistics, so I've had my fair share of psychology articles as well as linguistic articles to read. I've also came into university at first as a science major, focusing on pre-vet, so I've had my fair share of science articles I had to read. What I've noticed between them is that the psychology articles and the science articles are read very similarly and written very similarly. You usually take it section by section, reading it not like how you would read a book, but rather reading each section individually so you can get the best out of it. However, for linguistics, especially when it comes to English, you do read them more like a story. You have to make sure that the grammar is correct and more the flow of it works well, or else it wouldn't sound like an actual sentence. Generally, most writing focused on in high school is usually some sort of English writing. Do you think there should be more writing focused on fields such as science or math or even history and social sciences?
In today's schooling system, Common Core plays a big role in what students learn and what teachers teach. So for those who don't know, Common Core is a set of high-quality academic standards in mathematics and English learning literacy, which is ELA. So in simpler terms, these are goals that are outlined for what students should know and be able to know or do before they move on to the next grade.
What's your opinion on the Common Core? Do you think it works, or do you think there's things that could be improved?
So how English Language Arts Standards, or ELA, writing standards are broken down to are obviously by grade. The older you get, the more you're going to be able to do, and the more you're going to be able to need to do before moving on to your next grade. So just some examples. For grade 1, Common Core requires that first graders write opinion pieces in which they introduce the topic or name of book they are writing about. They need to state an opinion and supply a reason for that opinion and provide some reasons for closure. So that is just one out of the, say, about 10 standards that first graders need to be able to do to move on. The last and final section of the ELA writing standards through the Common Core is 11th and 12th grade actually combined into the same set of goals. This section is very based around essay writing and formations of that. So a couple examples are being able to establish and maintain a formal style and objective tone while attending to norms and conventions of the discipline in which the student is writing in. Another example is provide a concluding statement or section that follows form and supports argument presented. So ELA in writing is one of the many sections in the Common Core, but the standards that I'm reading off are what teachers and educators base their evaluations on. So they'll put a student's piece of work in front of them, and they'll put the standards, and they'll compare the two and decide whether they think the student has successfully completed the Common Core standard, and if not, they'll evaluate if they need to be held back. If you guys are in similar situations as me, I graduated high school in 2013, so I had just missed Common Core coming into play. So what I didn't realize was Common Core actually was created in 2009, but obviously was not strongly embraced in New York. It wasn't until about 2011 where state educators and the departments started to reevaluate the Common Core plan and make it more universal for New York to be able to use. So it wasn't until the spring of 2013 that it came into full effect in New York schools and the teachers were using it. So school districts are actually able to create their own curriculum, and then the teachers create their own lesson plans and how they want to incorporate that information. They can use outside materials and outside sources to come in that will best tailor to their lesson and teaching style. So there are standards that are included with Common Core. A couple of the main ones are it has to be research and evidence-based practices. It has to be aligned with college and career expectations. So that means it has to be things that students can use when they move on to college, they graduate high school, and they enter the career force. And they have to prepare all students to succeed in our current global economy and society. So writing is a big part of Common Core. It's under the ELA section, and it's different for every grade. So I am currently interning at a Buffalo public school downtown with a school social worker. So I was able to go in and meet with a couple different teachers at different grade levels to be able to kind of understand Common Core more, because like I had mentioned before, I just met that cutoff, so I never saw it play out into a school. So a common thing that I heard from the teachers was that they thought that Common Core would be too difficult for their students. When it first came out and it was printed and they were reading through it, they thought there's no way a second grader can do this and be able to move on. So right from the start, there was a pushback from the teachers versus the main state educators. They also didn't enjoy the pressures of having to do it, being forced to do every single thing with the bullet. And having it being so heavily specific and heavily evaluated, they were nervous about what might happen. But over time, they realized that students were actually able to do more of it than they thought they were going to be able to. So an example that a teacher had talked about was referring to the book. So they would ask their fourth grade class to refer to the book, and before she knew it, the students were doing it without being told. In my opinion, Common Core has its negatives and positives with anything. One of the negatives I was worried about is students all learn in different ways and different paces. So even though teachers are able to create their own lesson plans and curriculums, they are on a time limit, and those students might fall back, which could be harder. But in the same sense, that might be more incentive for teachers to pull their students aside and figure out what they need to be doing or what they need to change in order to help this student pass the assessment and pass the test, which directly affects the teacher.
Tests have become more and more important lately, which makes it where the teachers have to focus more on teaching for the test rather than teaching for the information that they need to. Do you think this makes teachers feel like they're teaching something they really don't want to be? Do you think this is pushing them into a certain area where they're not really comfortable?
While we were working on our project, we noticed the abundance of technology that was readily available to us. And this technology is something that schools are usually adapting to. A lot of schools are opting to go paperless, which means that there's a lot more online courses for kids that they have to take. A lot of kids nowadays end up getting a tablet or a form of personalized computer when they're younger from the school so that they could actually do their homework. This can drastically change the writing and the culture of the writing. A lot of times this can end up helping a kid and speeding up their writing process. They can also go through spell checks, so their spelling is usually much better, and they can easily share ideas with other students. So it opens a world of possibilities for them, but it also changes the culture of writing.
The increase of revolutionary technology is shaping the school systems different than how it was a few years ago. Do you think the increase of technology could, in fact, change the way students write? Do you think this will have more of a positive impact or more of a negative impact?
An interesting concept that Lynn and I thought of while discussing our topic was the concept of a basic writing, more like print versus cursive. Usually students learn this in elementary school when they're young. They usually have time given to learn print and they have time given to learn cursive. I went to an elementary school in Pennsylvania and I was given both time to learn it. I don't know how true this is for other states, but I remember as soon as I moved out of Pennsylvania and I moved down to South Carolina in 9th grade, I was surprised to learn that only a portion of the population actually knew how to do cursive well. And then once I moved up to New York, rather in 10th grade, I learned that up there they didn't even really do cursive that much, especially on Long Island. I actually had to have a moment in the SAT where they had to stop us and give a 10-minute lesson on how to do cursive so that people could just sign their name saying they took the test. I also had this one friend who was born in Long Island in Brentwood, and she ended up learning to do cursive only, where they didn't even really learn how to do print. However, she ended up moving later on to another school further in on the island, and there it was basically print centered and print focused, where they didn't do much cursive. This actually affected her negatively in academics because when they would use print on the board, she was not able to read them. It also ended up
Going along
negatively
the idea that
affecting her
there's an
because
increase of
she had to do
technology,
extra time
do
out
you
of her
think there's any
schedule to learn
importance for
print,
kids to learn how to
whereas
do
everyone
cursive
else in the
anymore?
grade actually knew how to
Do
do
you
cursive.
think being able to
So there
actually
is a
write on paper is
possibility
going to
that
become
having
obsolete, or do you
a
think that that's
print-based
always
system
something
is
that a
going
kid
to end
should
it there.
learn, especially when nowadays everything seems to be going electronic?